Welcome. I'm Colleen Doak, St. Ambrose University professor in epidemiology and biostatistics. This video is an introduction to Review Manager for the students in our evidence-based practice course as part of our MPH program. In this video, I'm going to briefly show you how to open Review Manager and how to get into some of the main functions. There will be additional videos specifically showing you how to enter data for mean differences and standard deviations. This will give you just a general overview of the program and what it looks like. So the first thing you're going to see on screen, like here, is going to prompt you when you open it to log in. Please ignore that. You don't have a Cochrane Review login, and in order to get that, you would have to be approved to write a Cochrane Review. So we're going to click on Cancel here. And then an icon will appear, Review Manager, missing username and password, or both. That's okay because we're not logging into the Cochrane system. Now from here, you can go under File, New, and here's where you're going to create a new file that you'll save and keep working with. So the first screen will be Welcome to the new Review Wizard. I'm going to click on Next. And here you have to decide what type of review do you want to create. Even if you're looking at an association, you can always click on the intervention review type and enter the information in terms of odds ratios, means, and standard deviations. So the intervention review as a type creates a format for the writing process, but for the forest plots it will look the same. Click on Next. And here's where you give the title. So that title can be your intervention, leave it like that, or you can look at exposure to whatever you're looking for, young age. In this case, as an example, for some outcome in terms of perinatal depression, for example. And I'm just showing you this to give you an example of what kinds of things you can look at. You can also leave the title as intervention for health outcome, but if you personalize it, when you go back, you can see what it was you entered and which one is really yours. So if you click on Next here, make sure that you indicate in the next phase that you want the review to start in as a full review. And it's not that you're going to be entering all the information, but in order to get the data entry process that you need for forest plots, you have to indicate it as a full review. Otherwise, it won't give you that option. And then click on Finish. Now here your review is open. It gives you all of the options for entering text. We're going to ignore most of that because all we really want to do is enter our studies, data, and get the forest plot as our figures. So here I'm going to just show you studies and references for every study that you need to enter into your forest plot. You need to enter it under studies and references first. Otherwise, it won't give you the option to enter it. So we're going to click on References to Studies, and then I'm going to click on Included Studies. So we're going to go through the decision tree process. Okay, now if I right-click on the left side, it will allow me to add a study. Alternatively, I can go through on the right side and scroll down to Studies and References. And I can go to Included Studies and add a study on the right side. So the left side of the screen is a shortened version of what you see on the right side of the screen. And here we can add our studies. And here we can simply say author et al. Year. So enter whatever study you're looking at here. And you can continue, you can click on Finish, like so. And then it will simply, that's the shortcut way, that will simply appear under your included studies. And you can add a new study for every author 2 et al. Year. And then you can keep going. So for each one of those, you can simply enter author et al. Year and finish. So now we have 2 studies that we can potentially enter. Keep adding more studies if you want to add more information. Then once you have some studies entered, you can already start to enter the data. So that's where you go down below references to studies and go into data and analysis. So on the left screen, you have the option of data and analysis, double-clicking. On the right side, you see data and analysis, and here's where you can add your comparison. So when you're looking at a comparison, think of the exposure. You're looking at intervention versus control, or, for example, young versus old, just as an example. So here, that's our comparison, our exposure, or intervention. Click on Next, and we want to add an outcome under that comparison. So I'm going to click on Continue, and here is where you make a choice. I'm just going to show what it looks like going through this process, and I'm going to back out of it and go through in the other direction, just to show you that you can enter data as dichotomous. These are yes, no, so I'm going to click on Finish here, and then when you click on Finish for the dichotomous outcomes, it means this will give you odds ratios, or so here you open the screen. You have a forest plot which is empty on the right side, and the title is odds ratios, where the odds ratios on the one side are favoring the control if it's an increased risk related to the intervention, or it favors the experimental group if it's a reduced risk related to the intervention. Now you can change that from an odds ratio labeling to a risk ratio labeling just by going up to the top and toggling between risk ratio and odds ratio, and then they also have risk differences. So odds ratio is how it's preset, and that's the way the forest plots looks. It's going to calculate an odds ratio for you, but you can only do that once you've entered the data. So on the left side of the screen is where you would usually see the data, but you don't have an opportunity to enter it because you need information. And so to enter that information, you need to click on the plus arrow to the left of the odds ratio icon. That's Add Study Data. And here is where you can add information from all of your studies. So I'm just going to show you clicking on Author et al. And Author 2 et al. just to show you how it works. Click on Finish, and that's where you have the opportunity to enter information. So here you have potential information that you can enter, and this means that you have to have all of the pieces of your 2x2 tables for an odds ratio. Now if I click over to risk ratio, it's the same thing. It needs that 2x2 information in order to calculate your risk ratio. So it doesn't matter whether you toggle odds ratio, risk ratio, or risk difference. You still need to know all of the pieces of your 2x2 table. The main differences will be that, so you'll have to have your events and your total population. So how many people got the outcome or the condition, and how many people were there in total. That's the way the system is designed to enter your information. So make sure you have that information if you want odds ratios, risk ratios, or even risk differences. Now I'm going to go back out of this. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to go back out of it. So now we have the comparison young versus old on the left side, but we want to add another comparison. So we go to data analysis. We have young versus old. And I'm going to add a new comparison, and that is, our comparison will be young versus old mean differences. So the first one was an odds ratio. Now we're going to look at how does it look like if you want to enter mean differences. Go to Next. I'm not adding any data or information because I don't have any. But this is to show you what kind of information you'll need to collect together in order to create a forest plot. So what do you want to do after the wizard is closed? We want to add an outcome. I'm going to continue, and this time we want a continuous outcome, and I'm going to click on Finish here, and here it's going to open us up to the screen where it shows us what information we're looking for. We have to have means, standard deviations, and the total sample size for both the experimental and for the control group. And the rest of the information, the weighting process, and the mean differences will be estimated by the program itself. And in order to enter that information for this new outcome and exposure relationship, again, you have to toggle on the studies where you have information for that particular relationship and click on Finish. Okay, so here you see in white the opportunity to add information for this data. Now in other slides I'm going to actually show you the process and show you what it looks like as you enter this data, what happens with the forest plot. Once you do finish, so you've got all the information added, you want to make sure you go up into the file and you save as, so that you have your everything that you've entered and all the work you've done, that you enter it under a file name that you can remember. So in this case it's young age and perinatal outcomes. So if you save this, you can go back to it, you can build on it, and you can make changes. So just to illustrate that concept, let's say at the end of the day we go back and we want to make new changes, and we're looking at our references to the studies and we want to add new studies. So right click on, if you're working on the left side, if you right click it's going to appear on your new screen. And you can add the study from the left side of the screen, or you can go up into the text of review box on the right side and click on Add Study. So you can keep adding studies at all 3 and then 2009, let's say. So this is just an example of, here I can add a new study. Now what happens if I want to go back into my data and add that information into the data? So I'm going to go into the young versus old, click on OK. So here I'm back in the screen where we looked at odds ratios, and I have the new possibility of adding an additional author at all because I've added that to the study. So here I have the option of including the study, and I'm going to highlight that new study and finish it, and then I see that it adds a row to the data. So even after you finish, you can go back and build on the information that you've already entered. So I'm going to click on Save and close out of this program just to show you this is how the program works, how you open it, how you identify the authors, how you enter the data for a forest plot, and then how you can go back in later.